Welcome, welcome to our chat and learn today. It's going to be really great. We're going to be focusing on equity today as part of this series, which we'll jump into in just a moment. But first, my name is Hunter, and I am one of your hosts at Power to Fly here and moderators. And Noelle is going to be taking us through this awesome course. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and move forward. So today we are focusing on equity as part of the DEIB Fundamental Series. And as you are most likely aware that if you complete this full series, you will get a DE&IB badge for your LinkedIn. And the way you can do that is attend all 4 series and fill out a little questionnaire, a little pop quiz, make sure you're listening. And you will be dropping that link into the chat as well. And if you are like, but wait, I missed the D course, how in the diversity, what do I do? Don't worry. You can watch a recording of it and take the quiz, the form, and you will be all set from there. So you are going to be A-okay, my friend. So before we get started, no, you can participate. Please feel free to turn your cameras on. You don't need to be Instagram ready. This is a chill chat, you know, we're hanging out with our coffees and our plants and our pets and our what have yous, yoga mats off camera. Just sit back, relax. Feel free to turn your camera on. And if you do, just know that you might pop up on the recording. And we will send you a follow-up link of this chat if you participated today. But no, it will not be on the YouTube channel. This is top secret. This is exclusive material for you because you made the effort to sign up for this and show up. So thank you for being here. Please feel free to write in the chat any comments or questions if anything comes up. If you do it publicly, please know that this is a safe shared space, and please be mindful about that and respecting others in this space so that we can all get along and have a great time. And if you want to ask anything anonymously, feel free to go to the chat, select my name, Hunter, and you can DM me privately if you want to ask something anonymously, or if you have a thought or concern that you would like addressed. We will handle that as swiftly and respectfully as possible. And please feel free to keep up with Power to Fly at Power to Fly on all the things, and subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch other chat and learns and previous summits and interviews. There's so many great resources on there. Okay, without further ado, I'd love to introduce our very own Noelle Johnson here from Power to Fly and the DE&IB team. Noelle is a global DE&IB strategist and trainer with over a decade of experience working in operations across industries and transforming company culture to be more equitable while centering on belonging. As a facilitator, she has been recognized for her ability to maximize engagement and impact change throughout leading discussions on sensitive topics surrounding race, gender, sexuality, and ability. And now I'd love to hand it over to Noelle. Hi, Noelle. Welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Hunter. I appreciate you, and welcome everyone. I'm so excited to talk about today's topic. Equity is something that's very close to my heart, and I'm really excited for us to get in. So here's some of the main takeaways that I want you all to bring back with you today. What those differences are between equity and equality. We'll be going over some practical ways to promote equity in your workspace, and how to measure and improve equity at your organization. When y'all were asking questions, that was one of the biggies. So we really want to make sure that's something that you're able to walk away with today with understanding. So let's talk a little bit about the difference here between equity and equality. So equality is the state of being treated fairly despite any differences in the same exact way, whereas equity is meeting people and communities where they are and providing them with the resources and opportunities they need to achieve equal status. So when we talk about equality, it really does sound great. You know, why wouldn't everyone want to be treated the same exact way? And I'm really glad that folks think that way initially, because I have to say to you, while equality is a great idea, In practice, it can be very difficult because of all the barriers and roadblocks that get in the way of hindering marginalized groups from achieving equality. So equality is an excellent goal, but it isn't always realistic. And when we want to be realistic, that is when equity gets put into place. So the key here when it comes to equity is meeting people where they are and identifying those resources and opportunities that they need to help out, really even the playing field. Right? So we're going to take a look at what that looks like in practice. So if you're joining us here on Zoom, if you could raise your hand if you have seen this example before, equity versus equality. I'm seeing some hands. Yeah, okay. So while this was great when this first came out, this was put together by the Interaction Institute for Social Change. And while this visual was very helpful for us to have an understanding visually a while ago, this doesn't really work as much as it does today. So I'll talk about some of the issues. When we're taking a look here on the left, we see equality. Everyone has the equal amount of space here or the equal size here of the box. With equity is making sure that everyone is able to see at the same eye level, but we're missing a few things, right? So what's going on here with the fence? So the fence is an issue because we don't have the same access to the folks who are there in the seats. There's the issue with the fact that they even need to stand the whole time. Not everybody is going to be able to stand during however many hours and be sitting for a baseball game, right? Then are there any racial or social economic equities here at play that is keeping folks separated at this line? What I like instead is this example. So this was put together by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And I really feel like this is a better visual. So with equality, we see that everyone has the same size bike. That doesn't work when there's a height difference, like we see here with the first person, or if there's a disability, which we see here at the last person. In equity, there are different size bikes for everyone. They've considered all different challenges when it comes to accessibility. And everyone in this image is really met where they are and given the opportunity to achieve the equal goal, which is riding their bike, right? So this is just a better representation of what equity can really be. I'm gonna let folks look that in for a minute. I'm saying that's a lot of great visual. Yes, this is what we really want to see without having those barriers. So I want to talk through a couple of examples of equity and equality at work. So with the initial challenge here is coordinating time off for holidays and staff. So equality can look like giving the team the last 2 weeks off for the holidays. So given the last 2 weeks of December or the last week of December, first week of January. Oh, just a moment. My dog is going off. Just a quick second here. My apologies.
The beauties of working from home, folks. Here we are. I also have a little puppy. He's right off camera right now. I'm going to let him have a little moment while please introduce Francis. Here we go. We all got our dogs, friends. This is how we work from home.
That's the best part when it comes to these senior dogs. They just kind of have a mind of its own. So he thought that I was gone. He can't see anymore.
Oh, bless. What's his name?
Otto.
Otto. Love you, Otto.
Otto gets a little shining star here. Okay, so oh, here he is. All right, so with equality, it's getting those last 2 weeks off for the holidays. And that's great, right? Because the idea here is everyone's going to be able to take advantage of it. But what about people who don't celebrate holidays within those last 2 weeks? What about different holidays throughout the year? So what equity would look like as an example is really putting in a policy that allows everyone to take the time they need to celebrate holidays according to their culture and outside at the end of the year. And also making sure that people, I know that we're talking about equity today, but to make sure that people feel like they belong is, what if we could share a little bit about those holidays, right? So that people really have an opportunity to learn here. Another example of equity and equality at work is with the challenge of noticing that there is a pay disparity, especially when it comes to ethnicity. So equality is making sure that we're offering equal pay across all title levels. And that's a great goal, is to make sure that that pay is equal. But we have to take a look at where those gaps are. And that's where equity comes in, with noticing that people of color are not applying to the higher paying roles. So going into a deeper dive to find out where those gaps are. Is it that they're not seeing these roles are available? Or is it that it's not getting over to a wider, diverse pool? What is happening that we're not seeing people are coming into these positions? So that's what we want to take a look at when we're doing a deeper dive. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we can find those gaps. Yes, is the pay range posted? That can be a massive issue that makes people say, I don't think that I'm even going to apply. So we need to make sure that that is clear. With the challenge of getting equipment to new employees. So offering pay reimbursement for employees for the equipment purchases. That's great. You start a new job and they say, okay, if you go and you get your new computer or you get a new phone, we'll make sure to reimburse you. And that seems fine because you'll get that money back. But with equity, we're thinking of not everybody can pay something that's upfront. Maybe everyone's going on a business trip and there's one or two people that aren't going to be able to pay for their plane ticket. That's not going to be easy for them to do. And it can feel really embarrassing to be, hey, I saw everybody else in my team was able to pay for their travel, and I know reimbursement's going to come, but that's a stretch for me. I'm paycheck to paycheck right now, and that's not something that I just had available. So when we're being really mindful when it comes to equity, is we're realizing that there is a gap and that we need to be able to make something available to those who won't be able to afford to pay something like that upfront. So I really, when it comes to finding where these gaps are with equity, I think that it's really important that we take a three-pronged approach to identify the gaps. So there's audit, there's ask, and there's analyze. So I'm going to break down what you get out of each initiative here. So with audit, this is when we're going to take the time here to deploy a company-wide pulse or a DEI survey asking questions about equity gaps. These surveys are so important because you're going to hear from the people right out of their mouth what is missing, what they would like. A lot of the times we'll have it in our minds what people need, and that isn't necessarily what's needed. Then we have ask, holding discussions to do a personal deep dive on equity challenges. So we want to make sure that we are asking the questions outside of the surveys, because the surveys are great, but we have to take it with a grain of salt. And I'll be talking more about that in a moment. And last is analyze. So conducting research to assess what types of gaps may be apparent in the communities that your team belongs to. So you're pulling all this information. Now we need to see what we can do and really sit in and analyze where these gaps are and come up with some solutions from there once we have those gaps identified. So let's talk a little bit about the audit here with asking, what do I put on a survey? So before you can take any of these action steps to be able to fix the gaps that you've identified, you need to hear from the staff what they see as an urgent need and what are some full areas of opportunity. You'll also be able to see what is going okay already so that you're not spending extra effort on what people really feel is fine. What about small companies? Does this apply? Absolutely. Even with small companies, we can still do a survey. We can still make it anonymous. Now, if a company is so small that it's 5 people, then we really want to focus on that second prompt of asking, and I'll talk more about that next. So do know that not everyone is going to feel comfortable being completely forthcoming, right? Some people are also going to have some friction going on maybe within their role, and they may just, rate everything down as really low because that is how they are personally feeling, but it isn't, they may be somebody who's more of an outlier. But what's important here is that we can while we do take it with a grain of salt, what we are taking is going to be really helpful for us overall. So we do need to be really mindful of what's coming through. And we do want to take things very seriously. Another thing I want to say with these surveys, sometimes they can take some time, may take about half an hour. Be really thoughtful on the timing. Is this going, are you sending this out right before a big product is supposed to launch? Are you giving folks enough time to get this completed? So you need to be really thoughtful on that timing there and make sure that folks have enough time to complete it. I am a huge fan of the open-ended questions. So while you can use this audit as a benchmark for you to come back around to, because when we talk about analysis, we want to be able to come back and say, okay, this is an area where things have improved with equity, and those questions are going to be great when you have a scale to be able to range things, to have a range and have some percentages. But the open-ended question, this is where we allow people to be a little bit more vulnerable and to be more open. So making sure that you have some, especially if you have different sections in your survey, have some open-ended question opportunities at the end of each section, not just at the end if they have any thoughts. Help make sure that you're really specific in those questions so that you can get some really good candid thoughts that can be really helpful and also let you know how far along you are. Next here is to make sure that you're able to get leadership to promote the completion date and goal. And there's a lot of really fun ways that you can do that. One of our clients, they have a survey that's gone out and they want to see that 100% of the employees fill it out. And they said, if you fill out this survey and you complete it on time, then the CEO is going to take a pie to the face. Or we've seen that if we complete the survey, then everyone who completed this on time is going to get a $20 gift card. So if you can have some incentives, people are going to be more likely to want to get this filled out. So here are some examples that you can put on your survey. Do you feel like you have the accommodations that you need to succeed? So here we're really taking a look at, do we have, for folks who have different, who are maybe neurodivergent or have a disability, do they have everything that they need to be able to do well in their role? Do you feel that the benefits and the pay are fair? So I see a lot of companies are really hesitant to put that question up because they feel like, well, everyone's going to say that it's not fair because everybody wants to make more money. Still put it up. And then when you're taking a look at the data, you can see how that transitions, because we can often see that when equity is really highlighted and you're really spending time to do the work, that metric actually can change and people can feel like it is more fair. So while we can have the assumption that no one's going to be happy with pay, you actually might be surprised. And it is important that that question does get out there. And also when it comes to benefits, and they may be able to give you some ideas that you might not have even thought of when you're able to get some of that feedback in. So we want to be able to tie it to that metric. Do you feel that you have equal opportunities to develop your skill set? So I like this question and other questions that are really tied to professional development. Professional development is one of the best and clear ways that we can put in real equity, is to be able to know that people are able to understand what their skill set is, be able to show up as a subject matter expert in what they do. And that can be done in a lot of different ways. But we want to make sure first that it is equal, and two, that it's something that it seems like the organization does prioritize. It is something that is of value. And then we can take things here from the next step. And then another really great question that you can ask on your survey is, do you feel that promotions are awarded fairly? Right? So if that's another area where some companies can have some hesitancy because of past disgruntled folks, employees that are in that were letting them know that I think that this wasn't fair, and it may have gotten a conflict that you thought was silly. This question can be disregarded. But we really want to make sure that this question is asked because we can get a lot of value at it. And like I said, we want to make sure that we are taking this with a grain of salt, but we can still get a lot of value out of that question. How about, do you feel like the benefits and pay are fair compared to other places that you've worked? So what I like the idea of the question, but there are so many places that are completely unfair. What I don't want folks to do is compare it to a place that might have already been toxic, might have already been a place that was problematic, and you feel like, okay, well, I should just be grateful for what I have, even though I know that it's under industry standards. So you can add, do you feel like the pay and the benefits are fair, aligned to your skills and experience level, or do you feel like the benefits and pay are fair to industry standards? So you can add more to that, but I definitely wouldn't want to compare anything to the past, especially as more organizations are looking to get better in that aspect. Excellent. I see some good questions here, and I'll keep looking at them. How would you manage people who have the same role who may want to know if they're earning more than them? I'll definitely spend some time talking about that. Okay, so next here is making sure that we are asking and having these questions, having these conversations about equity. So here at Power to Fly, we do something called courageous conversation. I'm sorry, we do this thing called listening circles, where we take people who are in, they can be in different demographics, they can be in different departments, but we want to go ahead and ask real questions that can help us get a good insight on what's going on. We let folks know that this is something that is going to be completely safe. Your name isn't going to be taken, your title isn't going to be taken, which is, helpful to have a third party do it. But even if you are doing it, you need to be able to create enough safety to make them feel like they can be honest and say whatever they need to say and know that what they're saying is not going to be used against them. So creating a safe place is really important here. Definitely you want to make sure that you're taking down notes, but anything that seems really targeted towards anybody in particular, it's really clear what this person's role is. We want to avoid that. But if there's something that's going on that's extremely problematic and it needs to get raised up, I would talk to that person one-on-one and say, I really do feel like this needs to be elevated to HR. So a quick example of that was working with an organization, and we were doing a listening circle, and every woman of color on the call had mentioned that their hair was being touched. So there wasn't a lot of women of color in the company, but so, people knew exactly who they were, but I had to bring it to HR because it was a serious enough issue. But I went ahead and made sure that I got permission from the group to say, we need to do something about this. It's okay if you don't want to be the person to make the ask, but I do need to say as a collective, this is not okay. And we can get these kinds of insights through having these kinds of discussions. What's also really great about these conversations is that people can realize that what is going on to them is happening to other people. So we can get to a place where we have our heads down, we're doing the work, and we might be feeling some kind of a way when it comes to equity, but when we're able to open things up to these small group discussions, we're able to get a lot more out of it. Another thing that you can do is have one-on-one conversations with your employees and with different teams. And that, while it may take more time, it does give more room for people to be a little bit more vulnerable if they are just more comfortable in that sort of a setting. What's important here with asking is that you make sure that people feel like they're listened to. This can be one of the issues that can make people feel like, what was the point? And we can see that with surveys too. If we don't see what were the results from this survey, if we don't see what came from this, personal conversation that I had talking about the issues here, is anything going to happen, or do all of these results sit on a shelf? People really need to understand what's going to happen so they feel like they're being listened to. Even if you're saying, what you're saying is being considered, even if it isn't something that's going to work, you can explain why it didn't work and who listened to what they had to say. All of those things are really important with making people feel like they can be better connected with these things. Now, with having these sorts of conversations, you may be quick to react. And what is important here is that you listen to believe versus listening to understand. And what do I mean by that? So when I say listening to understand, this is when somebody lets you know something that happened that's really problematic. They're explaining a gap that they see maybe in pay that they think that is related to their race. And you're saying, I don't really think that is an issue, because I took a look and, the pay is equal across the bands. I don't really feel like that's true. And with doing that, that person automatically receives, oh, okay, you think that I'm a liar, you think that I'm making this up, you're not taking me very seriously. What's important is that we can listen to believe. And that looks like, I may not understand where you're coming from, because I can't, no matter how hard I try to put myself in other people's shoes, I'm still going to have some issues when it comes to listening to believe. So we need to, I'm sorry, with listening to understand. So we need to make sure that we take some space here to really listen to understand, to listen to believe. Next here is you can consider using an anonymous box so that people can share any kind of issues that they're having that's really related to DEIB. And people can feel like they're being listened to when you can take actions off of that, even though it is anonymous. So there's all kinds of platforms that you can use nowadays so that people can send things completely anonymous. Being able to use that is great. Some organizations have a helpline that people can call that's anonymous, and that's great too. But make sure that it's really clear that that is available. I have seen time and time again where an organization will put together an anonymous inbox and they feel like it's great, nobody's using it, but it's nowhere. They might have announced it once, but it doesn't really get socialized after that one announcement, maybe on a newsletter. So make sure that it's clear on your intranet, in the onboarding information, that people always know that that inbox is available to them. I'm seeing Jackie saying transparency is key. Companies need to provide feedback and take action. Absolutely. And that follow-up is so important. If we miss the follow-up, people feel like I have just wasted my time, right? So we want to make sure that people don't feel like they're speaking out into a void, especially when they're being brave enough to let you know where they see some opportunities to be better. Okay, so next here is that analyze. So what do I research? So along with taking a look at the survey data that you get back and the information that you're getting from having these either one-off conversations or small group discussions and anonymous box, beyond that, what you can research is understanding what companies in your industry are doing to be more equitable. And this can look different from company to company. So you're going to want to do what feels like the best fit for your organization and your values, but understand how that's working. And you can take a look at what's going on from what you've researched online. You can take a look at some of those best companies list and what they're doing to really prioritize equity. But another thing that you can do is have some one-off discussions with people that work in these organizations. Talk to people who are in similar roles at different organizations in your industry and ask them how they're doing that. Go to events that are focused on DEI that's in your industry so that you can find out what are the standards, what is working. Next is to know your demographics and research the ways that companies address those equity gaps. So we need to make sure that we're not just taking a look at one, but many different types of demographics, and we tend to take that time there to do that research. Next is so that we're going to make sure that we do a good audit here and also analyze what our pay structure is. So especially when it comes to gender and race, because we find the most pay disparities there. So we want to make sure that that has to be a part of our process. This is unavoidable. It can take some time. You may need to work with different folks and different teams to get a better insight here. This can also be an area that can feel the most sticky because people don't want to see sometimes those inequities. So we need to make sure that we're able to put a mirror to it, but we can't do it until we really do sit down and do that analysis. So making sure that we're taking the time to really do that is so important. Next is that you're going to want to do a accessibility audit to see that your organization is applying to ADA compliance. That's if you're in the US. If you're in other countries, there may be other types of guidelines and compliance organizations that can help to make sure that your organization is being thoughtful and being as accessible as possible for those with disabilities. And you can also take a look at your benefits package and see where there may be some gaps. So take some time and analyze those benefits package and make sure that those are being being thought of. When I'm also thinking about accessibility and ADA compliance, one area that we can forget, because we can think about some of the physical disabilities, because we have all kinds of folks that'll come in, make sure that things are to building code, making sure that the office has everything that it needs. That may sometimes seem easy for some of the physical disabilities, but we aren't always looking at folks who have invisible disabilities, folks who are neurodivergent. And this also is a reason why I think that accessibility needs to be a part of some of the questions that we're asking when we're doing surveys and when we're speaking up to people. And we need to make sure that we're really taking a look at that. Another area that we can see an issue is our websites. So I don't know if everybody knows this, but in the United States, your website is considered a place. So it means that even because it's considered a place, that too needs to be ADA compliant. So it's important that you get your website. There's all kinds of software out there that'll take a look at your website. It'll do a quick run through. It'll only take a couple of minutes. And in these, when we get that audit back, it tells us what we can do to make our website more accessible. Yes, accessibility on websites is essential. I completely agree. We really need to make sure that we're spending some time on that. So with filling in the gaps, we need to make some initiatives on the areas of opportunity. So with pay, we need to make sure that we're making pay equity a strong priority. So leaders across the board should have transparency on how the pay structure works and training on how to eliminate bias from pay. So sometimes we'll see that only certain, maybe the executive leaders have an insight on this, but not the managers. We want to make sure that anybody who has people that are reporting to them have a clear insight on how the pay works. Next is benefits. We want to make sure that you're able to commit to the benefits and perks that benefit all people. If your benefit only supports certain people, it's going to be an issue where other folks are feeling left out. And we can see this in lots of different ways. So we can see some organizations, actually even some states, it'll be a rule that you can take 24 hours to go to anything that your kid needs, maybe a parent-teacher events, or maybe your child has a recital. So they'll give 24 hours for all people who are parents, and then people who are, maybe they don't have children, but they have to take care of a parent, or they have other people in life that they need to take care of. When this happens, we need to make sure that we can extend that over to all people. So we need to take a look at our benefits and making sure that there's a way to make sure that everyone can be impacted by that. Accessibility, we want to make sure that there is correct accessibility. We need to correct accessibility issues very swiftly and make pathways to continue improvement. And we want to make sure that we're socializing these things. How do we make sure that everybody has an idea of what can be done, what is going to be happening, where you are right now with the analysis, and what you are doing right now to be able to make some of those changes? Because when you're changing things in the organization, sometimes it can be very subtle, like changing your website to have like a few things available, even just the font or how large certain images are. Things like that really do matter, and people should hear about them, even if to you it just felt like it was a really quick fix. So make sure that you're able to summarize that and share those with your team. But accessibility, that is so important here. Next is skills. So we want to make sure that we're able to champion ways for folks who are underrepresented to have their skills developed. So while this can include continued learning, it can also be sponsorship, mentorship, and more. So we do find that people that are in underrepresented groups can not have the kind of mentorship that they should. And we can also see this when it comes to sponsors. And just for anybody interested, the difference here, a mentor is somebody that you meet with pretty regularly. This is somebody who can help you really guide you on your path and help you as a professional. But with a sponsor, this is somebody who's able to open up the doors. They're the ones that say, hey, make sure that so-and-so gets in on this meeting. Hey, I really do think that, I can see so-and-so growing in this company. You mentioned that there was a promotion coming up. You really should consider them. So a sponsor really can just make some short statements that can help you get in the right place. So making sure that you have a way to build those kinds of relationships in your organization is really helpful to help people be able to advance and be able to highlight their skills in a way that makes sense for them in their role. Next is recruitment. So this is an area that we spend a lot of time as diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging specialists, is making sure that we're being really inclusive in that, but we also want to make sure that we're being really equitable. So equitable recruitment means having accessible job descriptions with inclusive language, and that their skills are based, that this is very skills based versus making sure that it is credential based. So while education is really important, not everyone has access to get a degree. Can somebody who has the right experience and the right skills be able to do this job at the same level as somebody who has a degree? If that is so, then that needs to be something that we take off. There are obviously some roles where a degree is going to be required, right? But in anywhere where it isn't, we need to make sure that this isn't as prioritized. And also being really clear when it comes to recruitment, when it comes to job descriptions, anywhere where a hiring manager has expressed where they have some bias. And we want to make sure that folks are going through bias trainings. So with working with an organization, somebody had mentioned, I do have a bias with education, not only that somebody has had a degree, but that their degree comes from a prestigious school, because I went to a prestigious school. So for that person in that organization, they had to remove education off of resumes completely, because that was an area of opportunity that needed to get fixed. Oh, I love that, Victor. Thank you so much for sharing that tool. I'm a really big fan of Accessibility. I love that tool. And what Accessibility does is you can put it onto your website. They do an audit that you need to be able to make lots of changes on the back end, but something that they have that you can use in the meantime is a tool that'll make all sorts of changes for you. So it'll take a look at folks who have ADHD. It will screen your website so you can look at things kind of like line by line. It'll highlight a whole row at a time so that you don't get overwhelmed. It'll change the font on things for people who have autism, for folks who have seizures. It'll change the colors on certain things if you have visibility issues. It's excellent. So that's Accessibility, but there's a lot of tools that are out there. There's Audio Eye and a whole bunch. So if you're interested in putting a tool onto your website, it looks pretty cool, but it also makes it more accessible for anybody who's going to be using it, including your employees. But we need to be also taking a look inside. If you have an intranet, does everybody have the same level of understanding? Or does everyone have the same level of access? If you have some information that's out there, could there be a visual guide that's going to be more helpful for folks? So making sure that we're really taking a look at everything. If we have, let's say that we have our employee handbook needs to be put through a screen reader and it can't be read. We need to make sure that there's a way that we can fix that. So we need to make sure that when we're doing these accessibility audits, that we're able to look kind of inside out so that we can be as inclusive as possible, and also that we're staying to regulations, right? We also want to make sure that we're taking a look at growth opportunities. Are people really able to grow? And I talked a little bit about mentors and sponsors, but we want to make sure that people not only have a pathway, but that it's very clear. Do I have a clear pathway to understand what that next step is for me at this organization? So for some organizations, they'll think, well, we have all these postings, people know that they can just go ahead and apply. But is that clear to the person that are in the roles that they can excel at? They may not feel that way. Also, for different demographics and for different cultures, you may have been told that you need to be able to be perfect at all of these different skills before you can even consider to apply, where you may think, well, anyone who has 2/3 of these skills can apply to the role. If I know for me as a Black woman, I've been told, you really need to make sure that you have everything down perfectly before applying. And that isn't necessarily true for each role, but I won't know that until I have somebody encouraging me to apply to a role and really understanding at what point is it going to be a good time for me. So making sure that there are some feedback loops that managers have to people who report over to them what those next steps are. We want to make sure that we're able to tie these initiatives to business goals as well, because sometimes we'll have, sometimes we'll have a manager who doesn't really get it, right? So we need to be able to speak to how these tie to business goals. And I know that is a question that has come up before, and I'll be able to answer that a little bit more in depth if anybody would like to. Okay, all right, so at this point, we can get into the Q&A. Hunter, I'm ready for you to go ahead and drill me.
Okay, great. So thank you so much, Noelle. Let's first give Noelle a digital round of applause for that very helpful and insightful presentation. I feel like I'm in a masterclass right now, which we are. So thank you so much. So folks, what we have now is we have about 20 minutes, and I have a list of pre-submitted questions that some of y'all sent in advance that we've pulled aside here. And if you have any questions that come up throughout, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and Noelle and I will take a look at those as well. So first, from the pre-submitted questions, we have, what are some of the misconceptions about equity in the workplace, Noelle?
Yes, I think that one of the biggest misconceptions with equity, especially because I find that people who work in DEIB tend to belong to a group that is underrepresented. So we know right away where the equity gaps are for our own demographic, but we may forget others. So that's one of the biggest issues that I can see. But some of the other areas that we can see that that folks are willing to take a look at that they can forget is how important pay is. And folks can feel like, well, I hear about pay equity, but I don't really know that it belongs in the DEIB house, and it absolutely does. Even if that feels outside of your range of skills, that's when we need to make sure that we're partnering up with somebody that can help us really understand the bands and how those work, and really push to making sure that there is pay equity in those spaces.
Yeah, I completely can understand. It's so easy to be like, oh, focused on the one thing because that's my personal experience. And then there's so much that can just get lost because it's not my personal experience.
100%. And I think that that's where I see a lot of DEIB professionals start to falter, is that they're focused so much on themselves, and for good reason. It makes sense for you to want to attack the things that you have seen that have been inequitable, that have been make you feel like you don't belong, and what can feel like such a big job is making sure that everybody is covered. That's why research is so important, because we spend a lot of time understanding what's going on in our own communities, but we really need to understand what does inequities look like. If I'm straight and I'm thinking about the LGBTQ community, I need to really dig in a little bit more. I need to be able to get those insights, because I may not know. When I'm taking a look at folks with different religion, the different areas where there is some barriers, I might not know about those barriers until I start asking questions and before I start doing some research. We want to make sure that as DEIB professionals, that we really are doing a deeper dive, and that we can have some culture research to make sure that we don't miss anything really critical.
Yeah, and I love how you're highlighting research here, because we've talked about this in other summits at Powerfly too. Research is different than going to like the one person that is maybe the minority in the room and asking them what the problem is, right?
Yes, that's I've been that person many times with like, oh, Noelle, you can answer all of our Black woman queer problems. Like, no, I can't. I can only speak from my perception. But I think that if you have people that you can ask, make sure that you come to them first saying, hey, I've done some research and I have something like very specific that I just wasn't able to find. If you have the bandwidth, do you mind if I ask you this question? So we can be really thoughtful in that, but we do want to come to them saying, I at least did the Google, I at least looked at some websites, so that we can really come to them correct. And I think that's important. And opening up the dialogue that way is a lot more approachable.
Absolutely. So we're also getting some great questions coming from the chat. And before I move on to the next question, just a friendly reminder that to get your credit for this course, feel free to answer the questions on the form. I think it's 4 questions. Maybe if you were extra clever, you were doing it as the presentation was happening. Everybody's different. There's one way of doing it, but now you can do it now. You're all pros. I bet you all can flip through those answers real quick. Thank you, Paloma, for dropping that in the chat right there. Oh, Eleanor was extra clever. Bonus points. So I love that. So please do that. Okay, so I got a DM, which I'm gonna read here. It says, I have a question. It's this. What if you're working with a company that is resistant to doing an internal equity survey? In my opinion, it's because they're afraid of finding out the issues within the workforce. How do you convince them to do one?
Of course they're afraid. I think that what happens is that the reason why people get afraid is that they think that change is going to happen too quickly. They're afraid that the question is going to highlight something that they're embarrassed of, or they know that there are some people who are disgruntled and that their thoughts are going to overpower everyone else. So that's why I think it's important to say that, like, we know that there are some people who are unhappy for various reasons. And, while we want to be able to take their thoughts really seriously, we really like to take a look at what everybody is saying as well. So it's not necessarily going to be everything is tailored to these folks, but I also want to highlight, like, what happens when you don't do it? What are we missing? We may be missing something that is so big, it might even be positioning us to be liable for a lawsuit, right? Because it could be a huge gap that is an issue. If not, it could be an area that is making people leave and you need to understand why. So we want to be able to keep really good people, especially folks who are in underrepresented communities. And we can't do that if we're not asking the questions. And then, explaining that it doesn't just stop here at the survey. It needs to go in a little bit deeper. We're going to have some conversations with folks too. This is just step 1.
Yeah, absolutely. We're getting some great comments in the chat here. People are talking about how they enjoy this session, but people can, Alyssa said, people are also confused naming problems with creating problems. Someone one-upped that, Yes, Alyssa, yeah. We need to listen to the entire community.
Absolutely. And yeah, naming problems, like, we can see that there are issues. There's nothing wrong with that. We can't fix everything. If somebody says, I think that everybody needs to get a $50,000 bonus, and that doesn't make sense for everybody's role, that's fine. That doesn't mean that we have to do anything. It just means that we need to make sure that folks are listened to, and that is important.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, friends, we have about 13 minutes left, so keep those questions coming. I'm getting some more DMs, and I'm going to go to those. And but first, I'm going to bounce back to our pre-submitted questions here. Noelle, what are your go-to best practices for improving and promoting equity in the workplace?
Yeah, so you heard me talk a little bit about surveys already. This is still so important. So I'm gonna hammer y'all over the head because, like, surveys are so important and they tell you what is actually happening, and versus what you think people want. You may be hearing the whispers of what's going on and all that. A survey is going to be able to tell, I can show folks, like, really black and white what's going on, and I can also use that as a benchmark. Some other things when it comes to promoting equity is understanding where the gaps are and then socializing that you heard it and what you're looking to do to improve it. And like I said earlier, even those little small changes, share those. So if you're making some changes with and I'll use the example I used before with accessibility. And now folks who have visual impairments are able to see the website, and before, or they're able to hear the website, and before they weren't able to hear the website. Letting people know that it's great. Even folks who are able-bodied and they're able to see it, and that isn't an issue for them. People need to hear, okay, this company really does care and they are making changes. So maybe they'll be able to listen to me too. So that really does help open the door.
Awesome. Okay, what else we got here? Can you share some concrete examples of how equity has been promoted in companies with which you've worked?
Yeah, so I was working at an organization where I was managing the company culture, and I was also managing all of the new people that were coming in. So I was doing all the recruitment and all that stuff. The website that we were using had a lot of issues. So we're using an application tracking system that really left a lot of gaps that would take people out of the running if they had any typos. And while making sure that people have are using good grammar is great, if they're not in a role where they're going to be doing a whole bunch of writing, and that's not something that really matters, I may have gotten rid of somebody who's excellent that may have had dyslexia or had another sort of an issue, and I completely disregarded them. And yes, are the tools like Grammarly and stuff like that available? Yeah, but they still miss things, and that doesn't mean that this person isn't going to be a good fit. So one of the things that I took a look at is like, this is an equity issue because this is a barrier that is preventing people from being able to get into our applicant pool. So I switched us over to a different database. So you can find little areas of inequity in almost any department. We need to really take a look at that and just see like what small shifts can happen there. So that was one that made a difference where we were able to get more folks in.
Great. And some folks are asking for more resources from you in the chat here. So I'll let you do that at your leisure.
Which is like so much of it is like from my brain, but I think that when it comes to application tracking systems, almost all of them suck, y'all. Like if you do the work, you understand it. So take a look and do some research on some of the best ones, and make sure that when you do demos for these companies that you're asking questions about equity or any other tools that you're using. Ask questions about what is it, we're going to be moving on to this new software. It seems really great. Let me ask some questions about accessibility. So make sure we're asking those questions.
Yeah. Okay. So we got just under 10 minutes left, folks. So keep those questions coming. Now's the moment. How can we get leadership involved in creating equity strategies or even policies? At my company, leadership tends to be resistant to investing in DE&IB initiatives.
Yep. When we hear about DEIB burnout, this is what it is that we're not getting the buy-in from leadership. A lot of the time that can cause us to have burnout all on its own. I feel like we're taking a walk uphill. It's very frustrating. So some of the things that are helpful when this happens is to take a look at what the business case is and being able to tie these initiatives to the business's goals. So making sure that we do that and we're very clear on it. And for some leaders, anything that just feels like it's emotional based, it's not going to resonate with them. So we need to be able to tie it into to business goals overall, and then also talk about what the risks are. So like, let's say that I'm really interested in using a tool like AudioEye or Accessibility, and my CEO is like, I don't really know. I really like the way our website looks. I don't want to add any extra tools on here. And I say, okay, but did you know that if your website is not ADA compliant, there's an increase of lawsuits that are happening right now. It's up like 200%. We don't want to open ourselves up for that. So while you may be taking a look at the way that it impacts people, you need to be able to tie it to, I just don't want to get into any trouble. And we want to avoid any financial risk to the org.
I love that. It's such a smart tool because it's like, I'm actually helping everyone here. And as someone that's invested in DE and IMB, you're also like, putting it forward and doing the good work.
Yes, absolutely. And you can use what you're seeing happening to other companies, because if somebody makes a mistake and it gets, it becomes trending on TikTok or it's all over LinkedIn, use those examples, because your senior leadership team may not be paying attention. And you can say, hey, we do not want to be these folks. So we want to make sure that we're not on that same path.
Yeah. I had a somewhat related DM question that was sharing about how their company is really resistant to salary transparency, and they're just not budging on it. Can you speak to maybe if there's any tips you could give to, because like that, well, I love what you just did too. And someone commented like, yes, bring it back to the money, back to the biz, like how it's helpful for them. Is there a way that that can be helpful for leadership to be transparent about salary?
I think that they need to, at least at a minimum, start to make sure that all directors and all managers have clarity on that.
Mm,
So that's a good place to, that's like a good baby step. It's not really a baby step, it's a big step for some companies. So making sure that that's clear. And then also asking the reason why. Why is that not transparent? And in the United States, I'm trying to think if this is all United States or not, but communicating about salary is something that is completely legal. For a long time, people had it in their minds that it was illegal to ask about how much somebody else paid, and to talk about salaries with one of your colleagues that's not illegal. So we want to, having that transparency, trying to talk to how that benefits the company. It's it helps everyone, and having it out there, I think, is just a benefit. It doesn't really cause the issues that you think that's going to cause. So when you're able to show the worst case scenario isn't actually what you think is going to happen, it's not reality, that kind of helps people take a breath and say, okay, maybe it would be all right.
totally. A little shout out to the chat here. Thank you, Rosalind, for all your work you've been doing with Noelle, and is posting ways you can stay connected with Rosalind and Noelle here. And also some shout outs from Paloma there. If you've with the Power to Fly Chat and Learn is the box there. If you missed the first one, fill out, there's the follow-up link of what the next steps you can do. So you can watch that, take the quiz, and then you can be on your way to getting that DE&IB badge for your LinkedIn page. And actually, maybe, Noelle, can you tell us, why is that even important? Why is that helpful? The badge.
The
Yeah.
badge? Yeah. So DEIB has been around since the 1960s, and it has really transformed over the last few years. Showing something that is current, that you're really on top of your skills, is great for your employer to know that you are working to, be the best DEIB professional as possible, that you are ahead of folks who may be using some really outdated information. Because let me tell you, that really does hurt organizations when you're not on top of things. So being able to show that, I think, is great. And it's a great way to really stay connected to other folks who have the badge as well. So I'm always taking a look at folks who have it on their screen, because I just know where my people are.
Absolutely. There you go. Well, we have just 4 minutes left, Noelle, and I think you have access to some of those questions too. Is there any topics that you would want to touch on before we wrap up here? I just want to make sure we're not missing anything that is
Of course.
top of mind.
So somebody asked, how does equity impact company culture? And I thought that this is a really important question, because it really does affect folks in so many different ways. And one of these ways is agility. We can see that folks won't apply to positions that are higher up, or don't really seem to have the visibility in it. And that's when we don't get that diversity of thought that we really need. That's when we don't get the innovation that we need. So having better equity means more agility. It also means better psychological safety, which means that people are able to get their job done much more effectively and don't feel like they need to come in, take a look at their computer, and turn it off as quick as possible. It makes people want to be better connected and okay to make mistakes. And it really does help with retention overall. So making sure that we're able to spend some time and understand what retention really looks like. Equity impacts it so heavily. So those connections there are essential.
Great. And there's a great question here I think might be a wonderful note to end on, is how can I advocate for workplace equity for myself, and how would you advise starting that conversation with management?
I love self-advocacy. I think it's so important. It's a great skill to have in so many different ways. So when it comes to equity, when you're talking over to a leadership team, is making sure that you're able to speak to what the issues are, because you may have a lot of strong feelings about it. Your feelings are completely valid, but if we lead too much with those, people stop to listen, or they tend to try to tend to how you're feeling. So you're saying like, I feel like this is racism, this is for all these different reasons. You're completely valid, but you need to be able to explain what the facts are versus just your feelings, because what they're going to want to do is say like, oh, that's not really what's going on. No, we want to be able to show what the facts are. And when you're advocating for yourself, consider that it's not just, I saw somebody that was like, more puppies, more puppies. But when we're advocating for ourselves, consider that this isn't just for you. So for a very quick example, I noticed that there was a gap in something that I was doing on my team, and I'm somebody who's neurodivergent, and I saw, hey, I'm not the only neurodivergent person who works here. So maybe there's we need to switch this for me. That'll be helpful for me, but it can also help other people that work here. So keep that in consideration when you're advocating.
Absolutely. Okay, so here at, yes, the more puppies request for our last moment here. Congratulations. Make sure you fill out that form. They just posted it again. Francis would love that. Francis is a big advocate for DE&I and B and P for puppies. It's very important for him.
Critical.
And so, Noelle, thank you so much for this masterclass of an hour. And thank you all, friends, chiming in here for your support and showing up. And like Noelle said, it's so awesome that, here we are. Here's our people, right? You are it, and you are with your people here. This is a huge importance. And also it's a development that can continue and only, help our careers, and we can help each other's careers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.